Good evening. Thank you for participating in tonight's virtual town hall hosted by Spokane's 3rd District legislators, Senator Andy Billig and Representative Marcus Riccelli. Some of you have submitted questions in advance, and we will relay those questions to the lawmakers. You may also submit your question live in the comments section of the platform you're watching on. Submit your questions now, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Before we get started with questions, the lawmakers opening remarks. Senator Billig, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, my pleasure. My name is Andy Billig. I have the honor of serving the people of Spokane as state senator from the 3rd Legislative District. I also serve as the Senate Majority Leader, and really looking forward to this discussion tonight. Thanks for joining us. And over to my seatmate, Representative Riccelli.
Hi, everybody. I'm State Representative Marcus Riccelli. I serve as the House Chair of the Healthcare Committee and on a number of other committees, and I look forward to the discussion and the opportunity to engage with y'all.
And we're going to spend most of the time on your questions. So thank you to everybody that submitted in advance. And remember, you can submit in the comment section of your platform for questions live during this town hall meeting. And but first, we're going to start just with very brief remarks and sort of the overview of where we are in the session. So we're in the 60-day, what's called short session. So we're doing supplemental budgets and some policy bills. We have just less than 3 weeks left to go in this session. So it's gone quickly, and we are fast approaching the end. This is a big week because the budgets came out this week, the 3 big budgets for the state, the operating budget, the transportation budget, and the capital budget. So the House and the Senate each put out a proposal. Then we're going to work on them with amendments and then pass them, and then negotiate with the other chamber to put out final budgets that hopefully we'll vote on. Our budgets in the Senate have really reflected the priorities that we've been working on this whole session, which are housing, behavioral health, public safety, K-12 education, and childcare. And there's lots of good things in all of those categories to help the people of Washington State. And more particularly for our job is to help the people of Spokane. One note, a lot of those things I just mentioned, housing, behavioral health, K-12 education, public safety, sort of statewide. But there are some very specific things for Spokane, particularly in the capital budget. There are funding for very specific Spokane projects like the Northeast Youth and Family Center and terrain. There's also money for Chaz to have a mobile dental clinic, which is badly needed. And then, we're always looking out for Spokane. And so one of the other priorities we've had as a delegation and as a 3rd district is to protect our transportation funding. The transportation budget is in sort of a dire circumstance financially. And so we're playing defense there. And I'm very pleased to report in the Senate budget that we have successfully protected the funding for the North Spokane corridor and for the North Division Street bus rapid transit, as well as some other smaller budget items. So with that, I want to hand it back over to my seatmate, and then we'll get to your questions. Representative Riccelli.
Yeah, thanks so much, Senator Billig. And I think that's a good overview. I think that we're aligned in not only delivering for our state on priorities, but our local priorities. Again, I would echo the sentiment on things such as housing, behavioral health. I think public safety remains top of mind. One of the things, particularly as chair of healthcare, to provide access in greater amounts to our communities. So even in our urban areas, we have primary care access that's underserved, and certainly in our rural areas. When we look at behavioral health access, when we look at primary care access, one of the things that we need is a good, strong workforce. So it's about creating more opportunities for more people to go into these professions, creating the bigger pipeline, but also ensuring we're not burning people out and that we're keeping people who are already in the profession paid fairly and excited to do their job. So going forward, I think we'll remain focused on holding a lot of the priorities. I think one of the things that I'm pleased to talk about is some of the funding in the House budget to provide extra support for the city of Spokane and homelessness services. I think we're looking at funding our street youth and particularly our efforts at Crosswalk. I think these are important programs to make sure that we're moving forward and making sure all have the opportunity to thrive, because we know not everybody gets the same start, but that's where we're moving, and making sure that everybody can thrive regardless of the zip code they're born in. So I'm excited to continue to push priorities. I do believe healthcare is a social determinant of health, so I spend a lot of time there. I'm also continue to work on food security. We know people won't thrive. That's what I learned at Gonzaga with Maslow's hierarchies of need. We know people won't be successful. They don't have a roof over their head or food in their stomach. And so making sure we're meeting the most basic needs for folks. And also when it comes to housing, we focus a lot on homelessness, but we know a lot of people are just one paycheck away from being in crisis. So making sure we're providing opportunities for people to remain in stable housing is important and something we're focused on. With that, the point here today is really to get your questions. I will make one note. We are in the 3rd district. You're all represented by 2 House members and 1 senator. So we are down 1 tonight. Representative Ormsby, who chairs the House Appropriations Committee, is in the midst of some serious budget work tonight and unable to attend. He sends his best wishes, and I know he will follow up with folks. And we work together as a team to deliver for Spokane. So we'll make sure he's informed of the questions that come tonight. So I'll turn it back over to our moderator and look forward to getting into the question and answer portion.
All right, here we go. And we'll jump right in with a question from Cynthia, who asks, will the elderly get any food assistance on our EBT cards?
Yeah, so what I'd like to focus on, I understand EBT is important. What we're looking at really, though, is significantly increasing funding for senior nutrition. So things like Meals on Wheels, et cetera. We know that thousands of seniors are going unfunded for support with meals. We know it's not just about those meals too. As somebody who works in healthcare, we know that contact with folks is sometimes the only contact our seniors will have, and is extremely important for checking in on them and making sure that they have those important social connections with the broader community. So we're looking, and I know both budgets are including a request for senior nutrition dollars. I think that's one of the most important things we can do. And I'm actually looking on the House side to see if we can up the amount a little bit, and then see if we can come to an agreement to make sure that we're providing needed funding for senior nutrition, seniors food pantries, mobile food pantries, Meals on Wheels, and a lot of other nutrition services. Over the course, we've lost about 39% of our funding for nutrition services. Some of that went away with some of the federal funding. So looking forward to supporting that.
All right. Our next, we had several people ask about climate change and the record-breaking heat waves, and wanted to know what the legislature is doing about the risk of drought and fires.
Well, thank you for that question. You know, the climate change is real. Climate change is affecting people in our community and across the state every day. And I'm really glad and proud of the work that we have done as a state. We are leaders in the country as we can combat climate change. And we're trying to do it in a way that is going to make the water cleaner, the air cleaner, and help us to reap the economic benefits of moving to a green economy. We've done that in all kinds of ways, including investments in supporting aviation, alternative aviation fuels to be created right here in Washington State, and a slew of other industries that are connected to the green economy. So we benefit financially as well as environmentally. And just, you know, we can't talk about climate change right now in Washington State and not talk about this initiative that's been filed that is going to likely go to the voters this fall, which would roll back one of our signature policies to help address climate change, the Climate Commitment Act. This initiative helps to reduce emissions. So we're doing our part in taking responsibility and leadership on climate change in our state. But it also takes the funds that are generated from the allowances from emitters and then invests it back into our community in really important things that make our communities better and safer and cleaner. and we cannot take a step backward. We need to maintain that leadership position and those investments this fall.
Okay, great. Our next question comes from Teresa. Teresa says, I know a lot of us are struggling paycheck to paycheck. We have higher taxes, increased property value, higher grocery costs, etc. Can you explain to us the surplus of $3.5 billion in the state budget from 2023? I don't understand the surplus while we struggle.
Well, thank you. That's a really good question, and I'm really glad, Teresa, that you asked. So, I mean, I get it, and we get it that it's tough every day to make ends meet, and so many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And so we're really looking hard at affordability issues. It's one of the reasons we have passed bills in recent years, like the Working Families Tax Credit, that helps to give back money to the people who need it the most. We just proposed a utility tax rebate as well. But specifically to your question about a surplus, one of the reasons we end with we call it a reserve more than a surplus, is for two reasons. One, even though things are tough right now, we need to actually have a reserve in case things get even tougher. There's a major earthquake, there's another pandemic. We need to have a little bit left in our savings account just in case there's a really rainy day. In fact, we refer to the reserve as the rainy day account. But there's another reason also. A lot of the things we do for our progress, like building roads and buildings at WSU Medical School, whatever it might be, we do that with bonds, and those bonds we pay back. And right now, because of our really responsible budgets and because we have a responsible reserve, we have the best credit rating you can have as a state, the best. That means we, the taxpayers, all of us, pay the lowest interest rates on those infrastructure bonds that we put out. So that's another reason it would actually cost us more in the long run if we were to spend down to zero and not be responsible to not have a little bit of a savings account. But we're going to push it as far as we can to make sure we're investing in important services while also keeping a responsible reserve.
Our next question comes from Julie. Julie asks, are paraeducators getting a raise? We are currently paid below the poverty line.
Well, I guess I'll take that as well, because in the Senate, we do have a proposal, a bill that we passed that would raise funds for paraeducators, and that's in the Senate budget. The good thing is the Senate budget and the House budget both have really big investments in K-12 education. It's the paramount duty for our state. We fund K-12 well, but not well enough. And we are investing between the two budgets in special education, in increasing pay for paraeducators, and then what's called MSOC, which is materials, supplies, and operations for school districts. So the good news is there's going to be a lot more support for K-12 education.
Our next question is from Mary. Mary asks, what are you doing to advocate for less costly insurance benefits for retirees in the PEB system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, here's the thing is that the folks who have worked in our public employees, they didn't go into those jobs to get rich. And so we need to make sure that they can age with dignity, that we can honor the work they did. And, we are seeing rising costs across the board. So I think a number of the measures that we need to look at are just the cost sharing that occurs and the plans that are available, how much increasing costs there could be for deductibles and cost sharing. We have to watch premiums and make sure that it's manageable and support folks when those opportunities come. Again, people didn't go into public service to get rich, but there was promises made. And one of the promises that we make to folks is that they can retire with dignity. And that's actually when we need more people to go into public service, we need to show that we're honoring those commitments. And so when those things become out of reach and seniors are having to make choices between, important things like prescription drugs or food and things like that, that's just not acceptable. So we have our eye on that, and we're looking at those rate spikes and things that can be troubling. And I can tell you that I'm very focused on making sure that it remains something that's within reach for folks. I think the other thing too is that we have to honor inflation and the cost of living increases and make sure we're doing right by folks and providing them COLAs as needed.
And I see that the questions and comments are starting to come in through the comment stream. Just remember, you can put your question in through the comment section of your platform that you're watching this on. Thank you for all the great questions and comments. I just want to respond to one as a follow-up to my last comment. And somebody's making the comment, I think, so Chloe, I think, is saying that the $3.5 billion reserve seems really large. The reason it's 3.5 billion, that's about 10% of our budget, and 10% is the level that we're shooting for a responsible reserve. So it seems like a lot, and that's because it is a lot, but you got to remember our budget is about 35 billion a year. So that's why we shoot for that target.
Okay, and we've been getting quite a few questions about housing, so I think we'll go cover that topic next. Some people have asked questions about rent stabilization and affordable housing generally. They're curious about the next steps for the rent stabilization bill in the Senate and what else the legislature is doing to make housing more affordable.
Yeah, I can start. First, what's being done to make housing more affordable? Well, one of the biggest things that the legislature does is to invest in what's called the Housing Trust Fund. This is the main way that affordable housing gets built in the state. So we did record investments last year at the beginning of the biennium, and now are adding to those record investments in the supplemental capital budget. We also have really focused on density and incentivizing and allowing more density. The best place to build is where there's already services. So where there's already water and sewer, where there's already police and fire coverage, that's where you want to build. And we've been doing that in the last couple of years, and we have a couple more bills, one in particular that will incentivize conversion projects from office space, which office space is really soft right now. There's a lot of open office space, to incentivize owners of buildings to convert their office space buildings into residential. It's a way to get more housing stock online quickly. And so we're going to try to incentivize that because we need housing at every level and we need it fast. In terms of House Bill 2114, that is a bill that would put certain caps on rent increases with certain exceptions. That bill is currently in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. We have a hearing tomorrow. Looking forward to that. And we will see in what form it comes out of committee, if it has the support to come out. And I got asked on the question, do I support it? So I definitely support helping to make housing more affordable. What I want to do is try to find the right balance so that we're putting some caps on, so we're making it more affordable. We're not also, we need to make sure in that policy that we also don't inadvertently hurt housing supply in the long term. So we got to figure out a way to balance those two things and do it right. I think there's a way to do it in this bill. And I'm going to be listening closely in the hearing and then working to get it out of the Ways and Means Committee after that.
I would just add a few things on housing stability. I definitely think opportunities for folks to create equity is important. I think Senator Billig, myself, led by actually Senator Patton, worked on some condo liability reform. Creating opportunities and pathways for folks to also create equity is important. It's important for building wealth, for potentially starting businesses, et cetera. So I think that's important. I also would just say, I would echo, we've been investing a lot of dollars into the Housing Trust Fund. We also try to do investments in the capital budget. I saw that there was a comment with a SNAP project that's being funded. We've done things with Catholic Charities, with VOA, Volunteers of America. We look for opportunities to invest in our capital budget. So I think that that's important as well.
Okay, and we're going to jump in and take a question from one of our watchers on YouTube. This one's from Tom. And Tom asks, Representative Riccelli, are you concerned that both private and public employee health insurance companies are getting much tougher in approving coverage for diagnostics and treatments requested by doctors?
Yeah, this kind of angers me. The amount of work that goes into prior authorization for a number of things that are getting approved, but it seems like barriers are being created for the providers who are closest to our patients. I am proud last year worked on a Representative Simmons bill. I worked very closely as we worked to modernize how we prior authorize things, encouraging people to use technology because it's on both ends too. We need to move more providers to using electronic medical records and et cetera, and using the technology. What we found is when both the carriers and the providers are using technology, we can significantly reduce the gap in those times to turn it around. But I'm frustrated at how much insurance companies are nosing into healthcare and causing delays in care for patients. And it's something that I'm following quite a bit. I'm engaging in. I think one promising area where we did find agreement. I thought it was honestly a small doctor who was nearing retiring in Republic, maybe, that was using fax still, but it turns out a lot of our major urban hospitals are still using old technology. So I think that that's a place where both the carriers and providers can agree, and we can get things like guaranteed turnaround times. If those prior authorizations are not being turned around because they're incomplete, when you use technology, it lets one side or the other know that's the case. So I'm frustrated like you, Tom, and I think that insurance companies should butt out a little bit more and get out of healthcare between the provider and the patient. But I think we're making meaningful progress, but we need to continue to do that. And I share your concerns.
All right. Next, we've got a question from John about the initiatives. John asks, why does the democratically controlled legislature refuse to follow the normal procedure of bringing the initiatives up for debate?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm glad because I definitely wanted to touch on the initiatives. For those that don't know, there are 6 initiatives that were filed they're called initiatives to the legislature. The legislature has 3 options on initiatives to the legislature. We can do nothing and just let them go to the voters. We can pass them into law, or we can offer a alternative, and then the original initiative plus the alternative goes to the voters. One of the things I've learned, because this doesn't happen very often, but one of the things I've learned is there is no normal procedure. There have been 21 initiatives to the legislature in recent memory since 1990. 9 of them have had a hearing. 21 of them haven't had a hearing. The legislature just lets them go right to the ballot. So we announced a couple days ago, we are having hearings on 3 of the 6. And those 3, so there's 3 that are really clear what they do, and they're bad. Okay. And so those are going to go to the voters. We're not acting on them. We do not have the votes to pass those initiatives because they're so bad. And I'll just briefly tell you what they are. It's the repeal of the capital gains tax. The capital gains tax funds childcare and early learning and K-12 education. Billions of dollars, $5 billion over the next 5 years for childcare and K-12. And it's paid by people who have a major profit event. They sell stocks and bonds or a business and make more than $250,000. They have to pay 7% of that over $250,000 in profit. That's about 3,000 people in our state pay that tax, and then 8 million benefit. So that one's clear. that would be a huge step backward, and I think the voters will get that, and they're going to do the right thing, and we're going to protect that funding. The next one that's going to the voters, because we definitely don't have the support, is the Climate Commitment Act, nation-leading climate legislation to take responsibility for our climate emissions and then invest back in our communities. That one we're not touching. There's no support to repeal that in the legislature. We need the voters, go to the voters, and the voters are going to do the right thing. And then there's the long-term care, WA Cares, which is our program to help people stay in their homes and age with dignity. And there's an option or an initiative that would roll that back. They say it would make it optional, but it would functionally repeal the whole program. Bad idea, and we really need to not do that. And I think the voters will do the right thing on that. Those are clear. Then there's 3 other ones, one regarding police pursuits, one regarding parental rights for parents of school children, and then one regarding income tax, so would ban income tax. Those were written very vaguely, and we really need to have hearings to find out what they do from the nonpartisan staff and the experts, and then also hear from the public. And so we're going to have hearings on those, and we may actually pass those into law, or we may send those to the voters or do an alternative. We're going to have the hearing and see. So there's no regular process. We're hearing 3 of them. That's more than normal. And I think it's a really responsible approach the legislature has taken.
All right. Up next, we've got a question from Tina. Tina says, "Hi, Senator Billig. House Bill 1893, which would authorize limited access to unemployment insurance for workers on strike, is in the Senate. Will you support the bill? Will you support moving the bill forward and voting for it on the floor?"
Thanks so much, Tina. And I saw there was another comment from a Kevin that took the opposite position, which so that is a bill that has a lot of support and a lot of opposition. That bill is still in the Rules Committee, so it's not come out. We've not caucused on the new version. I can say I had concerns on the version that was originally introduced. I think that unemployment insurance is typically used for when people lose a job through no fault of their own. And I worried about the costs to all the other employers who would have to endure those socialized costs if there's people paid out who are on strike. So I had concerns with that version. There's a new version. As I understand it, I have not gotten into the details of it, but I've heard that it is narrowed slightly. I do want to mention there's another bill that was passed that's sort of in the same area of related to business labor relationship about captive audience, about not allowing political or religious speech in workplaces being compelled and requiring somebody to be in those situations. And that one was passed. So there's going to be movement in that regard, even if the UI for striking workers doesn't pass. But I'm eager to dive in and look at the new version.
Okay. Up next, we've got a question from Jamie. And Jamie asks, what are you working on to ensure people in Washington have their reproductive rights protected?
It's a great question. So last year we passed a suite of bills, whether it be from privacy bills to a bill that I authored on provider protections, ensuring that anything that a Washington provider does in our state under the Constitution would be protected. Also, that meant that any provider coming from another state, they wouldn't have their opportunity to get a license here hindered if they provided any kind of services that are legal in Washington. We're doing a number of things. Also, looking forward, the Judiciary Committee in the House now has the Keep Our Care Act to make sure when mergers occur between hospitals or healthcare entities that we maintain access to reproductive access, as well as a number of other important things, gender affirming care, and a number of other things. So we actually, I think Washington's been leading the way on reproductive access protections. We're continuing. I personally am sponsoring a bill that's in the Senate right now just to clean up some language on that bill I passed last year and ensure that there are no loopholes to protecting our providers who are offering that important care. And we know in Spokane the importance, because as states are around us like Idaho move in different directions, we want to ensure that all folks have access and they can do it in a safe way. And that also means that some folks come across state borders, and Washington's a place where people will have access to the full suite of healthcare.
Okay, we've got another question from YouTube from Nagamagana. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Senator Billig,
Nagamana.
There you go. Thank you. Senator Billig, can I count on you to champion 100% clean school buses, which is House Bill 1368, plus a budget, and vote in favor of it? This is so important for our children's health.
So that bill has not come before me yet. I'm not on the committee that got that bill. I am vaguely familiar with it because I've had a few conversations with advocates for it. Sure sounds like something that I would support. Look, we need to make a transition to a much greener transportation system, and we need to do that with cars. We eventually need to do it with buses. as well. And as I understand it, this bill will help with that transition while not creating a mandate, but it's going to provide supports for the districts that want to make the transition. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we're going to need to do that in just about every part of our transportation sector. So I always hesitate till I get into the details and see the bill with all the amendments that have been adopted. But I am very supportive of the concept, and I can't imagine I'm not going to vote for that bill.
I would just add that as that bill came through the Appropriations Committee in the House and we discussed it, I mean, as the healthcare chair, it is really concerning the amount of toxicity and pollution that our children get from the diesel fumes that come off of the buses. And I think this move is better for our environment and importantly, better for our kids.
And I wanted to grab, I apologize to our moderator, but sometimes questions pop up that I just can't wait for the moderator to pick. I just love Catherine's question about how are bills created? Can citizens work with you to form a bill? How does that happen? Catherine, absolutely. I think of the bills that I've prime sponsored, probably half of them have come from constituents. And if you've ever seen Schoolhouse Rocks, How a Bill Becomes a Law, and that, by the way, is nonfiction. That is actually how it works. I mean, there's not a little guy running around named Bill, but that video cartoon starts with somebody, they say, it all starts when somebody back home says there ought to be a bill. And it happens all the time. And I'll just give you one example from this year, but I could give you 20 examples. This year, when in a coordinated attack, paint was used to deface the two pride crosswalks in Spokane. And everybody called it a hate crime and assumed it was a hate crime. And then we found out in our community that actually defacement of public property is not included currently in the hate crime statute in Washington State. And I got calls from constituents and really led by Council Member Zach Sapone saying there ought to be a law. And we have now proposed that law with the support of constituents and the spark coming from the constituents. It's passed the Senate. It came out of the House committee today, and hopefully get a vote on the House floor soon, which will make defacement of public property a hate crime if it's done in a hateful way, the same as if it was done on private property.
Yeah, and I'll just add one. I think the bill that Senator Billig is talking about is very important because as it was started in Spokane, we saw just recently in Redmond, it had similar issues. So I think it's a statewide issue, and really pleased Senator Billig brought that forward. I'd share one of my moments where that happened. I met with the family of a fallen soldier. We have Gold Star license plates in this state. The stepdad said, why does my wife have to pay for a plate in other states? They didn't. This is they carry a huge weight. There's not a lot of Gold Star families, and this is a way that we can honor them. And we were able to carry that through and pass it. And that just came up over a cup of coffee at a local coffee shop, and ended up with the family members testifying, powerful testimony, and the bill moving forward. So this happens quite frequently, and it's actually one of the most satisfying things to do as a legislator. We don't get some sort of cap of knowledge and have all the ideas. We're here to bring ideas that we hear from our district and from the people that we are seeing every day and bring them to fruition. And that's a big part of our job.
Okay, next we'll go to Giancarlo. And Giancarlo says, hi, would you be willing to talk about Senate Bill 5462 and House Bill 2331 and how you will support school curriculum to include historically marginalized and underrepresented groups such as indigenous tribes in Washington?
Yeah, I think these are the bills. The Senate bill is about inclusive learning standards. And then I think the House bill is the one that would prohibit book bans and educational materials from being banned. And I support both of those. It's important that our learning standards. So OSPI, the state, that's Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, sets learning standards for the state. And then the school districts sort of under that umbrella will come up with the particular curriculum. But it's very appropriate and needed for our our state to update those learning standards to make sure they're inclusive, that they include marginalized communities. And so that when kids are in school, they can learn about people that look like them, that have similar backgrounds. That's inspiring for them. But more than that, or in addition to that, it is our history. We know through generations the history has not been inclusive, and certain groups get more included in the stories out of our history. We have to be proactive about being inclusive in how we teach. So that's what that Senate bill does. The House bill, I'm not as familiar with, Representative Riccelli maybe, but I believe it's about preventing books and other educational materials being banned.
That's correct. So, and because I do think that it's important, I think there's some misinformation going around about the bill as well. Really, this allows superintendents to engage in this important process. One of the things, because we did receive a letter from the Meade School Board that was concerned with local control, there was an amendment that we took on the House floor that says that after the superintendents on requested reviews and removals of books, their decisions could be appealed to the school board. And so I just want to be really clear there that at least in the bill as it stands, there is local control, and that's really important. But it is, it's important to make sure that instruction materials are not being just willy-nilly taken away, and that all of our students get the richness of the education they deserve so they can pursue what their academic endeavor in a way that I think we can all be proud of.
And I saw one quick follow-up that I see in the chat about overuse of the term hate crime. I don't think there's any way to overuse it when you're talking about defacing a pride crosswalk or painting a swastika on the side of a building. There are obvious hate crimes, and that's what we're going after here.
Up next, we got a question from Deb. Deb asks, so what are our representatives' plans to help parents of severely disabled children in District 3? Will you support a similar bill as 2184 next legislative session? Now, 2184 is authorizing payment for parental caregivers of children with developmental disabilities.
That's a great question. I'll jump into that. Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, we know that so many of our parent caregivers are giving up their jobs, are really struggling to maintain balance, don't have respite for their kids. And I think this is absolutely the next right step. I did meet and will continue to meet with our DSHS, our Department of Social and Health Services on this bill. We're looking for real solutions and ways that we can also draw down federal matching dollars that we might be leaving on the table. So for me, this is something that we need to focus on, that we need to see significant move forward on, and get our arms around how many caregivers are out there and how we can pay them fairly. Because honestly, it's the right thing to do, in my opinion, from a value standpoint. It also saves the state a ton of money when we engage this workforce. And who knows better to take care if they're willing to step up than a family member.
Next, we have a question from Ward about Senate Bill 5002, which is lowering the BAC level for DUI. He asked what prevented it from reaching the Senate floor for discussion and action.
Thanks for that question, Ward. So that bill did not have the votes to pass. And I'll just tell you about sort of my journey on that bill. When that bill first came up last year, it was a new idea. Big ideas, new ideas, when you're going to be, first, second, third in the nation on something, sometimes it takes a couple of years for it to happen. But this year I knew it was coming back and I wanted to be really educated. And I was confused by a lot of the conflicting information that I had received. There are some of the charts that I saw, talked about the blood alcohol level that somebody my weight could have 4 drinks and not even be at the current level of 0.08. And another thing that I saw was actually in the spokesman review said that a woman who's 120 pounds could have 1 drink and they would be over the be at 0.06 and be over this potential new level at 0.05. By the way, that graphic in the spokesman review was false. They had a citation for NTSB and the National Transportation Safety Board, which was not true. The NTSB all sent us a letter saying that was not true because that graphic was getting pushed around. But anyway, I was really confused. Like, is it really easy to get at 0.05? Could you have one drink and not even feel impaired and be over the 0.05? I had no idea. So I asked the State Patrol, and they thought this was an unusual request, but I asked the State Patrol if they would loan me a breathalyzer for a night. And so in a very controlled environment, all of us with other people to drive us, had some drinks and used this breathalyzer after each drink to test where we are. So we could get a real sense of where we were and what this means. And I was shocked that you could drink so much and not be over the 0.05 and certainly not the 0.08, which is the current level. And there were 3 senators in there, including me, who had been undecided. And all of us were in favor of the bill after that experience, because we saw just how you actually are impaired at 0.05 and above. And I believe that should be the law. Sometimes you don't have the votes, and we'll come back next year and try again.
Next, we have a question from Stephen. Stephen asks, what about Highway US 195 and the intersections just south of Spokane where more housing is being built? Can the state help to improve them?
I can jump in. I mean, we've certainly seen at times when we can make transportation investments according to concerns. I think on 195 specifically, there was an overpass or there was a turnoff that we worked on due to multiple fatalities in the past. And we need to look at things system-wide. Right now, I think I'll just relay that to a question I saw on road user charge. Right now, we're facing cliffs already in our transportation funding. The regressive gas tax is not a way to move forward. A lot of people get concerned about road user charges when it comes to privacy. I just have to say to people, if you're walking around with a cell phone, you should be less concerned about a road user charge. We have to look at ways that we're going to fund our transportation infrastructure in the future. And that will allow us to do more things. One thing I know that cannot help for any consideration is if we repeal the Climate Commitment Act and we're take away significant amounts of funding for important investments in our transportation. That will put us further behind. We've been behind for a long time on preservation and maintenance, on new projects. I would say, we need to evaluate the system as a whole and see concerns. And I'd be happy to, when I'm in Spokane, work with our Department of Transportation and interested citizens to come out and see if we have issues at that intersection and hear you out.
Yeah, thanks. And just picking up on that thread, I mean, I wish we could turn back the clock 25 years and control the growth there in conjunction with the infrastructure and not allow more growth until we had the fire station, until we had proper transportation corridors there, and to get the impact fees from the developers and the people who are buying the homes to actually pay for that development. That didn't happen. So now we got to play catch up. But I also just wanted to follow up. Representative Richelli mentioned about the Climate Commitment Act, and that's exactly right. Now, some people are saying, wait, the Climate Commitment Act, that doesn't directly fund road projects. So if the Climate Commitment Act goes away, that won't affect road projects, right? Wrong. All the transportation budget is under extreme pressure because of gas tax revenues going down and because of cost overruns on projects, is inflation on projects. So it's already under stress. If we take, and it's again, $5 billion out of the transportation budget, it's going to affect everything, because we're not going to just stop everything that we're funding with the Climate Commitment Act. A lot of those projects are really important. And so we're going to go through a reprioritization of all the transportation projects, and then we're going to fund them with whatever money we have left after that if the Climate Commitment Act got repealed. And I am extremely nervous about what would happen for the North Spokane corridor funding in that scenario. I think it is very likely it would be delayed, and it might even be worse than that. So it's one of the reasons, in addition to the climate leadership and doing our part to be responsible on climate change, transportation infrastructure investments are another reason why I'm so adamant that we not repeal the Climate Commitment Act.
All right, next we're going to Denise, and Denise asks, what stops the legislature from fully funding special education in Washington?
Oh, it's such a great question. Thank you, Denise. It's so important. Why don't we fully fund everything and, make sure that every person has a great healthcare plan and make sure everybody has free and great childcare and, special education. There's so many priorities that we want to fund, and we do have limits on our resources because there's a limit to the money that the state has. Now, I will say that special education is a lot higher on the priority list than other things. One, because it's part of K-12 education, which is our paramount duty in our Constitution, and we just have an obligation to do it. So we take it really seriously. Last year, the legislature, and that's the biennial budget, the big budget, we invested the biggest ever increase in special education funding because we know we weren't doing enough and we needed to do more. This year, both the House and the Senate budget have more investment for special education. It's still not going to be what would be considered fully funded, but it's going to be another big step forward. And the reason that we don't just, add, whatever it would be, the $500 million or $1 billion to fully fund it is just the lack of resources right now.
Okay, next we'll go to Linda. Linda asks, is there any possibility for universal health care in Washington state?
Yes, but it's a long road. People are paying ridiculous costs for copays, deductibles, and premiums. I serve on our state's Universal Healthcare Commission. We're looking to do things like standardize plans on the exchange so that we can make sure that people can make informed decisions and educated decisions. And I think when you look at the costs that people are paying, and the House has passed over and the Senate has moved out of committee a healthcare cost transparency piece of legislation. We have a healthcare cost transparency board. We need to make sure that we are not just containing costs, but fundamentally shifting the trajectory that people are paying out of pocket for premiums. We're doing a number of things. The federal government has, gotten rid of surprise billing, but at the end of the day, healthcare costs are unsustainable and we need a new model, and it takes a lot of work. So I think we need to continue to work on a trajectory towards universal healthcare, but there's a lot of things we can do in between, like get costs under control and make decisions easier for consumers to make on our exchange. And so I do think that I have hope, but I also think that there's some things that we need to do in incremental steps as well. At the same time, we're talking about this big picture because the financing piece of universal healthcare is one of the biggest pieces. We also need to get a waiver from the federal government, which is something that has yet to be done by a state.
Okay, next we got Washington State ranks number 4 in the amount of we spend per capita in tax dollars. It's over $16,000 per year per person. The average for the rest of the states is less than $10,000. That's not much of a question, but go ahead.
I'd like to address that one. Thanks for the question. So I think you're not looking at the total state and local taxes. I think you're looking at the sales tax. We're number 4 in sales tax, but you really have to look holistically at what's the total amount that we pay on average for state and local taxes as a whole, because we do have a high sales tax, but then we don't have a state income tax, and a number of our other taxes are lower. So when you look holistically, we're right in the middle. We're like, I don't know, we vary between 24, 25, 26 in taxes. So we're a middle of the road state in terms of what you pay in taxes, but by almost every measure, we're a high service state. So Washington's actually a really good deal when you think about that we pay in the middle for taxes and we get back at a very high level. And look, there's lots of examples. You can go to other places and pay lower taxes and get a lot fewer services. That's not what I want to be. I like being in a place where we're in about the middle on taxes, but where we have good schools, where we have good parks, we've got great universities, we've got a well-functioning court system. We've got, you look across the board at state services, and Washington, look, lots of places we can do better, but we do pretty well across the board. And so I think Washington's a really good value. Look, I wish we could just have no taxes and have great services, but that's a fantasy world. We need to look to make sure that we're getting a good value. And one of the things I'm concerned about is the capital gains tax is repealed at the ballot, which is, going to be something that we're all going to face if it doesn't, if nothing, there's no action taken in the legislature on it. Look, this takes us a step backward in terms of taxes, because it means, either we're going to cut services or we're going to add another tax that isn't going to be paid by just 3,000 people. Look, that capital gains tax I mentioned earlier, it's paid by 3,000 people across the state. In the 3rd legislative district, there's 23 people who pay that tax, and 8 million people across the state, and everyone in the 3rd district benefits from that. That's a way to make our tax system more fair and not put the burden on everybody else.
Okay, up next, we've got a question about higher education. And is there any work being done to reduce the cost of higher education, which is one of the few opportunities for people to escape poverty?
Well, one of the things I just like to point out to people, and it goes right as a follow-up to the high services, we're number one for our college grant program. So we offer the best benefits to middle and low-income folks who are going to college. So it's something we should be proud of, and it's something that pays off for our state in terms of having a well-educated workforce. We rank really high for our workforce. It's one of the reasons a lot of companies come here is because of our well-skilled, well-trained workforce. And so that is already good. Now, do we need to do more? Absolutely. And there's a bill that passed the Senate that's going to help. There's right now, there's some limits where you can only get the state need grant for 5 years of going to college. And the federal loan programs, the federal grant programs are all for 6 years. So we're extending from 5 years to 6 years, the years that you can get that college need grant, our nation leading college need grant. Then lots of other smaller things related to mental health and supports for students in our universities and in our 2-year community colleges.
And I would just add locally, I did work in the House budget, a proviso for Launch Northwest for the initiative to provide increased access and wraparound dollars for students. I'm hoping to hold that and see if we can expand it. I think it's an interesting initiative that is going on specifically in our area. And so I think that's a creative way that we can enhance opportunities for more people.
I see a question from Derek about there's a bill that would make some adjustments for utilities on the west side of the state related to natural gas. And I know many, especially restaurants and some other industrial users, are nervous about that bill, not because it would affect Spokane, but because it might set a precedent that would be bad if it came to Spokane for some of their businesses. That bill is in the Senate Rules Committee right now, so it's not come up for a vote yet on the Senate floor. There is, I think, talk about an amendment that would significantly address the concerns that I've heard from the hospitality industry. Because look, we're on a path to decarbonization. We need to be for our planet, but we also have to do it in a way that doesn't put an undue burden on small businesses and families. We've got to get that balance right. And I think there's a version of the bill that would get the balance right. And from what I understand, the hospitality folks are okay with this potential amendment. But we'll see if it has the votes to pass it all and if that amendment is offered.
Okay, next we got a question from Trevor. Trevor asks, I'm interested in hearing more about what you all are doing to help homeless youth in our communities. There seems to be more every year, and I'm concerned when I see kids downtown clearly in need of help. What can the state do?
That's a great question, Trevor. Well, we've long partnered with VOA here in Crosswalk, and they have a new home that they'll be opening up shortly near the community colleges, funding a place for our homeless youth to to provide them not only with a safe place to stay, but educational opportunities and wraparound support, I think is critical. I think we're doing other things too, like House Bill 1929 by Representative Cortez, which is helping some of our young people who are transitioning out of recovery. It's sometimes they don't have a place after they transition out of recovery to go, and this will ensure that they have housing stability as they transition. I think a number of the support services we provide, particularly to our LGBTQ youth, are critical, and how we are investing in those services and making sure that those young people have access to those services. We know that disproportionately a lot of our homeless youth are LGBTQ. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. And I think we just have to keep focused on this and making sure that we're investing. We're also providing transitional dollars, as folks maybe age out of things like foster care and things like that, to make sure that they don't become homeless in those times of great need.
Okay, and I think we got time for one more. And that question is from Kevin. And Kevin asks, are you doing everything you can to help us eliminate daylight savings time?
That's for Marcus.
Well, as you know, I was pleased to sponsor a bill and pass it in Washington State to move towards permanent daylight saving time. I will tell you that I work closely with Senator Patty Murray, who has been an author of, with Marco Rubio, actually, of the Sunshine Protection Act. We need to move to permanent daylight saving time. We need congressional approval. You might have noticed that Senator Patton introduced permanent standard time. I think people don't want to switch clocks. I think when we switch clocks, kids, their schedules are in chaos. We see more traffic collisions. We see more cardiac arrest. We see that actually when it's later, that there's less crime. But I don't think we should move to permanent standard time, even though we could do that as a state, because we're only on that 4 months of the year. So I am doing my work. I think there's a lot of important things, but this is something where everybody seems to agree that we need to stop switching the clocks, and that I think we need to move to permanent daylight time, particularly and move in a regional way, not just go at it alone, though. And so I'll continue to do what I can at the federal level, and it's just something that's a win for everybody. So I hope we can show that government can work.
All right, thanks everybody who took time to participate in tonight's virtual town hall. Now I'm going to throw back over to the legislators for a few closing remarks. Representative Riccelli, would you like to go first?
Yeah, you may have heard me say this before, but a robust democracy can only exist with an active and engaged citizenry. I appreciate you doing your part. You could have done a lot of things tonight, but instead you chose to engage. We can do our jobs better while we're in Olympia. When we get this kind of feedback, it's always thought-provoking. And I really appreciate it, not only because it's informative, but it's, we are accountable to you all. And so it is a high honor to represent the 3rd District. I'm a Spokane kid, born and raised. I'm raising my family in Spokane, and we need to do more to ensure that everybody can thrive. But I am just so grateful for the opportunity to serve this district, to work with the people that I work with, Senator Billig and Representative Ormsby, and to just be engaging with you tonight. It's very meaningful, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah, it's a great team over here, not just my seatmates, who I really appreciate working with, but our staff, who do a lot of the legwork and hard work of communicating with constituents and helping to keep us on track. But look, we do the town halls a couple times a year, various meet and greets that we do out in the community, but we want to hear from you all the time. Our email addresses are up on the screen. That's my address. Marcus.Riccelli@ledge.wa.gov is Representative Riccelli's, and Tim's is the same format at tim.ormsby. And look, we need to hear from you. We work for you, and to do that job well, we need to hear from you. A lot of great questions that we didn't have time to get to. Send those along. I read and respond to every email that comes in, and really do welcome that feedback. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Keep in touch. We'll see you back in Spokane soon.